Good evening. Everyone's filing in. I thought I would just give a quick welcome as everyone starts coming into the attendees list for us. I will launch our first poll in a second, but for now, welcome to the fourth and final module in our free online short course, Agile Evolved, the Big Picture. It's presented by Brenton Burchmore. You may notice that I'm not Shane, the previous MC for this short course. I am in fact Chantal Hale, the IT Masters CEO, and I'm filling in for Shane while he's unavailable. I haven't led one of these short courses in a while, so please have pity on me for my mistakes. So while everybody files in, I'll just give the first of what I'm sure will be many reminders to set your chat to everyone so that everyone gets to see what you're saying, not just panelists. And then if you have any questions as Brenton presents, don't forget to put them in the Q&A where we can read them out and get more information from our illustrious presenter. So while we're waiting for everyone to actually jump on in, I will launch our first poll question. This one is on the largest scale project. And it is, what is the largest scale project in terms of contributors you have been close to, including external suppliers? And while we're answering that, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Brenton Burchmore, our presenter for the evening.
Hello, Chantal. Thank you for the welcome. How are you tonight?
I'm very good. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. I heard a rumor that there's another short course coming up next week.
It's not coming up next week. It's being launched next week. So anyone who's subscribed to IT Masters will be able to hear about our short course on CompTIA Security Plus. It is the industry certification that is the basis of one of our subjects, ITI 581 Cybersecurity Fundamentals. So you can get a little primer on that subject and also sit another one of these really fun short courses. And that one is presented by Dr. George Thomas, who is also an IT Masters mentor, much like Brenton. And that should be a fun time. So if you aren't already subscribed to our newsletters and information, please put your email in for us so that we can let you know about that one.
And is it another 4-week course, that one?
It is another 4-week course available for, if you do that and 2 other short courses, you can get 1 industry credit in our masters and grad cert. So it should be a fun one to sit and to prepare you for potentially getting an industry certification from CompTIA.
Wow, that sounds pretty awesome.
Before we get fully started, I just will do some of the welcome things. First up, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of the land from which I'm broadcasting, and pay our respects to their elders past and present. Just a big welcome to everyone for week 4, the final week of Agile Evolved, the Big Picture. This is a short course run by IT Masters in conjunction with Charles Sturt University. And as always, remember to set your chat to all panelists and attendees so we can see what you're saying. A survey has gone out for this short course, but we really would love your feedback. And Brenton wants to hear how amazing it is. So please make sure to fill that out if you haven't already yet. And again, if you have questions, remember to put them into the Q&A section so we can ask them to Brenton and allow you all to just chat in the chat box so that we can, have everyone engage with the presentation and not lose any of those great questions. I'd like to also welcome Lily Newen along tonight, who will help moderate the chat, and we'll be posting some relevant information as we go along. And thank you for everyone posting where you're from. It's really exciting to see. We've got people from Ghana and the UK and Mozambique. It's very exciting to have such a broad range of places people are from. Brenton, we've got quite a few responses to this largest scale project now, 113 out of the attendees so far.
Should we end that and share it? Because it's a wonderfully spread set of answers. I'm going to end the poll and share it. Have a look at that, folks. That is more balanced than I expected. We have people who have a whole range of scales of what they're used to or been with and familiar to. So I'm hoping that some of what we're going to cover tonight, and we are really only going to scratch the surface of some of these issues, is going to find something of value to everyone on this list. So And I do thank you for the reminding everyone about these surveys, Chantel, because as I'm the creator of the project, this short course, not just the presenter of it, I value the feedback, and we've talked about feedback in previous weeks in an agile sense. And of course, that's the feedback I need from you, the customer, so that I can iterate and build an even better short course next time.
And it's the feedback IT Masters needs to know what is our next short course that we should do and what should we put on the list. And we love to hear all of the compliments that I'm sure will be coming for you.
Thank you very much. All right. Shall we kick off, Chantel? Are we ready to go, do you think? Do we have enough
I
people?
think we're ready to go. Let's go. Yeah. Let's kick off.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. For those that are joining in for the first time, you're at the end of the ride, but everything we're doing is recorded, so you can play it back at any point. I'm going to end the poll. Did that disappear? Chantel, did that disappear, or did I just close the window?
I think I'm a little unsure. Sorry about this.
Has the poll gone? I don't know if I clicked the right button. Has the poll disappeared, folks? You stopped sharing, it's gone. Okay, a couple of people have just responded in chat that it's gone. Fantastic. This was the poll. We've already had that. Let's talk about the syllabus just to put you back on the page of what we're up to, how far we've been on this journey so far for the last few weeks. This is what we've covered in gray. This is where we're dealing tonight. Hybrid, scaled. We're going to talk about some of the issues of blending an agile format with a waterfall format. We're going to talk about some of the pitfalls and traps with that. We're going to have a slightly earlier break for questions this time because I'm figuring that might be a little bit of a hot topic for people to talk about. And then we're going to talk about scaling up Agile. So we're going to dip into SAFe. So the contents today, we'll first talk about waterfall and Agile. I'm going to talk about systems thinking as a conceptual introduction to the ideas that SAFe then builds upon. And when we talk about SAFe, we're talking about the Scaled Agile Framework from SAFe Inc. Now, this is going to hopefully build a picture of how incredibly structured things get when you try to do Agile at scale. And when we talk through this, as I mentioned a moment ago, we're going to be just scratching the surface. You could spend an entire 4-week short course just on SAFe, and you've really only covered the essentials. What we're going to do in 20, 25 minutes is literally skipping across the surface like a stone on the pond. So we won't have as much fun with that as we might on another occasion. However, I'm hoping that you'll at least be left with some of the key lessons that you might need to think about in any occasion where you're going to have to scale up a project. We'll end with our discussion tonight about wrapping that back into how agile ideas can actually manifest in the execution of a corporate strategy, and how something as big as the existence of the company still has linkages back to what structured large-scale agile can do. Now, first, a quick refresher. We talked about this model in week 2. We went through a slightly varied version of this when we talked about delivery, but here is the core iteration delivery model. This is the core of an agile mindset. This is the beginning over here, the envisioning of the core idea. This is the cyclic iterative process of, let's plan something, let's build it, let's see how it works, how good is it, get some feedback, and then rinse and repeat until we're done. So that's the iterative delivery model. Let's remind ourselves now, in contrast or in comparison, what the waterfall model looks like. Now, this model, you could describe this in different ways. You could put different labels on some of these things. But here is an example of the waterfall model in action. You start with an understanding of the need, or you look for an understanding of the need. So this is the business analysis process, requirements analysis, specifications, needs gathering. Then there's a business case discussion. There's a need for investment, a decision that, yes, we're going to throw some money at this need that we've now much more clearly identified. Then we need to do a system design. So the expertise, the technical, the figuring out of, well, what do we actually need? Let's design that. Let's figure all those details out. Then we have our planning, our project planning, within which we do estimates and we make guesses and we make assumptions. And to cater for all that, we have contingencies, and then our project is executed. And that's often, in terms of elapsed time, that's where a lot of our project time goes. That's where we spend most of our life, in the execution of the project that we've just got to the planning stage. Then, of course, we've delivered something, or we are delivering something. Then there's testing, there's user acceptance testing. There's various activities to check and see if it's okay. Then there's deployment. There's the training of the users. There's the change management that we need in order to adopt this beast that we've just created. And then there's keeping it running. Now, you could change some of these labels around. You could put some different words in here, and you could shorten it or lengthen it. But the most important part of this diagram is the arrows. The bit that says, okay, this first, then this, then this. That's the important part of waterfall. It all happens in a sequence. Whereas all of this, or the functions that occur within all of this, they happen over and over again during the iteration. So that's a fundamental structural difference. Now, it's worth reminding us that, because what really matters when you're deciding what methodologies, how you want to blend them, what do you need for this and that, what's the most effective way of doing it, it's a lot to do with how the decisions are different. So recapping a little bit of what we talked about in the decision-making processes, comparing that to waterfall. Waterfall is also known as plan-based methodology because it starts with a plan. And the plan is the boss. The plan is in charge. It is in control. And that happens because of the decisions we make up front. We make decisions about the requirements of the project, the scope of work. What does it need? What's the output we require? And we make all of the decisions about what that output in its entirety might look like. And from that, we're setting expectations with all of the users, all of the beneficiaries, everyone that's going to be using this thing. And from that, we were able to determine budgets that are decided upon. And that then leads to a complete list of work activities, the scope of work. All that is typically made in advance in a plan-based method. And where we have uncertainties, we use estimates. We have various methods and ways of figuring out what's likely to be the answer to our questions of variability. And then to keep that under control, well, we have change control processes. We have strict change control often. And we also have contingencies. So we have our plan B, C, D. We have our variables. We have our fluctuations in and our buffers in what we've allowed for. In the agile adaptive decision-making, what we make up front is the decisions about the vision, an initial understanding of what it is we're aiming for. There might be some constraints that we know up front. There might be some constraints that are flexible and some that are not. And the ones that aren't, we may be very clear on those. We might know what we want this thing to do for us. We know the value, we know the benefit, we know the end happiness that we want out of this thing. And we might even be able to make some key architectural or structural decisions up front and say, well, we want this thing to run in this environment, or we want it to do this in a certain way. But even some of those, we might need to do some initial experimentation. Those initial decisions might still take a sprint or two before we've got all of those locked down. And that's okay in an agile environment. And changes are explored, they're accepted, they're welcomed, changes to everything else. So these are things that we've been through and we've talked a little bit about over the last couple of weeks. When we look at hybrid, plan-based, or agile, there are some things that are common between them. Some things are similar, regardless of which method. And things like the core goals, the real objective of what's this thing going to do for us? How's it meant to fit into our strategy? How's it going to help us achieve our strategy as an organization? Those expectations are often going to be the same, regardless of what method we might try and use. The business justification, the rationale behind spending money and what we need to get back for that money, that's often the same or similar, regardless of the methodology. And the architecture that we're going to use, what software are we going to run it in? What platform? What form factor? What does it have to interact with? What are the dependencies? It must be built on this. It must connect to our CRM system. It must be accessible to customers. It must do this. It must do that. Prerequisites and must-haves. Those answers, they don't care what method we're using. And as I mentioned a moment ago, major constraints might be the same either way. We might have a fact that there is a hard deadline. I jokingly mentioned the Olympics as one of those deadlines that you really can't move some dates. And so we might be very clear that, well, there's this amount of money, or there's this time frame, whatever we get has to be done by then. So when we look for commonalities, we find them, and we find things that say, okay, well, these things don't matter, but these things really do. And I'm sure that many of you have already got your head around the fact that when it comes to the uncertainties, we're going to lean in an agile direction. We're going to look for agility that helps protect us from our ignorance, or more to the point, recover from our initial ignorance by allowing us to backfill that ignorance with answers on an iterative basis. But the things we know in advance, some of those are actually sacred. And one of those things might be the way and the timing and the scheduling of the delivery of value. It might be a case of saying, well, we have a 12-month window, but that's not all there is to it. We really need these things, this value done within 6 months. And we really need this stuff within 3 months. And no, we might not be able to agile that and say, well, that thing that you really wanted by April, nah, we've decided that we're agile, so you're going to get that in June. That could be a showstopper. So there's certain things that we might need to think about as to which method. And this can be which method for which decisions. It's not necessarily a case where you say that, okay, we got one methodology and it's just, we do everything that way. It doesn't have to be. We can bundle our decisions appropriately and say, okay, we've got a plan-based method for dealing with decisions that fit into that paradigm. And we've got an agile method for dealing with the super tight flow of information that needs to happen to allow us to leverage and make our decisions on the fly, because it's a very different circumstance. But we can do both in any single project. And probably the simplest, if I was to boil it down to its raw ingredients, the simplest factor is usually the degree of certainty. And I mean that in the sense of the certainty that's required or the certainty that's available that we have when we make our decisions. Required certainty might mean these are absolute must be or must have or must do. Or you might have certainty that you can't bring that certainty because you don't even know if that's possible yet. You can't lock in an absolute requirement if you're not even sure if that's even feasible. So it depends on the level of certainty that we can actually lean on. So if we can have certainty with some decision-making, and that might add up to quite a lot of plan-based decision-making, then we should do that. And we shouldn't get hung up about, is this waterfall now? Are we suddenly, is that what we are? Is it who I am? Am I on this waterfall train? Am I, falling down with the rest of it? It doesn't matter how we define and describe it. What matters is, where do we put the decisions? When do they happen? Who's involved? And how much do we allow those decisions to have flexibility? Because those things that have to have, where we don't have all the answers, or we don't have all the ideas, or the value we need isn't clear, we need the empirical, as in the experimental approach to some decisions. So we're not choosing a methodology for our project. We're choosing a structure for our decision-making. And we're putting the decisions where they need to go and where they can go. And it's one of the reasons, a simple reason why we say, okay, architectural decisions. We talked about sprint zero previously when we talked about Scrum. Architectural decisions happen right up front because everything gets built on that. So you have to have that figured out. It's a dependency. We also talked about, as a risk management tool, we talked about expansion over depth. We talked about the fact that in the first few sprints, you try this, and this. And you want to dabble in many things so that you've figured out just how ugly any of them might be, so you can react to that lesson, that knowledge. But that's still us having a plan-based approach to when we do certain things, because those decisions need to be early. It's not like, well, it's a product backlog and it's over here and we can just, close our eyes and pluck a card out and let's do that this week. We talked about the fact that one of the single biggest challenges with successful Scrum is the lack of sanctity of the release plan. We can use all of these ideas in a single project. We might call it hybrid. I don't call it hybrid. It's just a case of, well, plan what you can, adapt what you can't. But that's not always easy. Now, I've got to talk about a few challenges here, and then at the end of that, we've got a poll and we'll break for some questions. But this list of challenges isn't exhaustive. Some of you are going to be able to think, oh, yeah, but what about this and what about that? The challenges we get from trying to blend methodologies. Some people are stuck with what they're familiar with. I'm familiar with this method, or I'm familiar with that method. And we absolutely need to educate people on what it means to have decision-making either planned or adaptive. What's the point? What's the reason behind it? Why do some things need to be done in advance? How do we tell our Agile team that, no, you can't play fast and loose with these answers? They're locked in. And how do we tell the plan-based people to say, okay, you don't necessarily know how this other stuff works, but we're going to teach you. Deal with the ignorance by removing it. Another is comfort. Some people are really only happy when everything's figured out in advance and they have their entire schedule mapped out before them. Some people hate that. They're much more comfortable with, let's just figure it out tomorrow. I don't want to invest in thinking about it now. But what we just spoke through is that there are good reasons and benefits why some decisions get pushed back, and they are very specific reasons. And if we find decisions that really do meet that criteria, then that's a reason for people to get out of their comfort zone or be prepared to be shifted. But the alternative method that they're not necessarily inherently comfortable with has real value for the outcome of the project. But what about fear of complexity? Like people that are thinking, my goodness, this is going to be really complex. You're going to have two different methods. Well, no, we have one method, our method, and it involves putting some decisions up front and allowing some decisions to happen later. But there's degrees of later. These decisions we've already made. Deal with it. Get over it. That's where we're at. These decisions we're going to make next. Look out. They're coming. They're happening. We're going to lock this stuff in next. This stuff will happen shortly after that. And one day we'll get to these other things. And that is a decision or a bunch of decisions that we're making right now. Now, the complexity, it's only as complex as the project is. If we've got a project that's a handful of people, you don't need to be terribly complex about how you plan out those decisions. But if you have dozens and dozens and dozens of people, you need the complexity. And if we're worried about the complexity, we shouldn't take on the project because it's going to require that complexity regardless. Now, we know that project management was invented specifically to deal with uncertainty in large-scale investment. We want to do something new, something different, something uncertain. We're going to throw some money at it. Project management was invented as a way of increasing the odds of us getting either what we want or something useful out of that investment. And we've evolved what that really means to us, but that's still the reason for it. And the complexity is a tool that we use to bring about that certainty. Because if we go forward without that systemic resolution of the complexity, then we won't know how far off course or out of touch we are. What about the challenge of intensity and pace? The fact that some people are really affected by the fact that we're meeting so often, we're talking so often. You guys, some of you talked about this. When you talked about Scrum meetings, lots of people hate Scrum meetings because they've become something that they shouldn't be for some organizations. They're having their usual style of meeting, but on a Scrum regularity. They've got too much intensity for the pace that they're operating at. Or they're going too fast and they're lacking the intensity. So this is where structure, even at large scale, which we're going to talk about in a little moment when we start talking about, say, structure is the answer of complexity, because complexity is not about a mass of details. Complexity in projects is about a mass of interconnects. It's about the high number of forces that can influence other factors. So this can affect this and this can affect this, and you multiply that by hundreds and thousands and millions. That's complexity. And so structure organizes the points of interconnect. It organizes the flow of information, and it ensures that people and information come together at appropriate moments to work together to make decisions. Then there's an issue of ownership. Who owns this project? Is it owned by Waterfall? Is it owned by this? We can break that up. We can have separate, disparate value propositions where the plan-based method is owning these certain criteria of our project, and the agile method is owning these other things. And I'm going to offer you a starting point for what that might look like and how you might break that up as an example. But how we do it is up to each of us. Here's the simple answer that you start with to think, okay, how are we going to blend these two? Why do we blend these two? Where does it come from? Here's a starting point. You could plan based waterfall the release plan. What are we going to deliver? What capability are we going to deliver and when? That's the macro. That's the whole bunch of user stories that come together to deliver capability. That's the release plan. You can waterfall that. And then you can agile the user stories, the individual features, the stuff that needs the iterative feedback. You already know that you need to build the database before you populate it. You already know that you need architecture before you put code. And there's a bunch of other prerequisite things that we already understand. We can waterfall those. But then we can agile the minor details that we balance along the way. Another way of describing this is you could say that waterfall can own the constraints. Waterfall is the thing that says, okay, we've got an absolute deadline. So therefore, everything we're going to get must be delivered by then. So we have to structure the release cadence of capability to make that happen, or whatever the constraints that are primary are. Waterfall can own that problem. But the actual value of, is this actually any good? Agile owns that, or can own that, because that's the thing that we learn through feedback on an iteration by iteration basis. Now, obviously you wouldn't use Agile if you're building a bridge. You're not going to go from one pier to the next and say, well, let's get the engineers in and see if they're happy with the load bearing capacity of our recent pillar, because if it's not good enough, we'll have to make the next one a bit stronger, right? No, that's not how we build bridges, and many other things. But there might be some flexibility in things like surfaces. There might be some aesthetic differences. There are certainly reasons to change large-scale engineering projects at some point. Many of them have. Let's have a poll whilst we see if we gather a few more questions to see if anyone has any specific things that they want to raise, ask, or talk about regarding blending of Agile and waterfall methodology.
I have launched the poll. Which of these challenges
Excellent.
to a hybrid project would you likely face? And while people are answering that one, sorry, I thought I would ask some of the questions that have been asked of you, Brenton, just to give you a chance to drink that water. But firstly, let's get to some questions. One of the questions I saw for Waterfall, Stephen had asked this, by the way, for Waterfall, I'm not sure how the business case can be done before the system design, unless there are assumptions made around the system cost, or does the business case only include revenue at that stage and is refined later?
It's a good point, and I guess it's a question of where do you put different things, and we're trying to simplify something that is many multi-facets within the boxes that I put up. But in my experience, there are more than one business case decisions, but there's usually a cost to system design. And so there has to be a business-based decision about whether investing in that cost is worth it or not. So there's usually two steps, at least two steps. One is to say that, well, we have a need, and we throw some money at the need, and that was probably an easy decision because that was probably kind of cheap. But we've figured out our staff are whinging all the time, so let's invest in finding the need. And then we say, oh, we have a need. So is there a business case to design a solution? That's a step one business case, perhaps. And then you get a solution. And then you have a business case that says, well, oh, it's going to cost us that much? Wow, okay, do we really want to invest in that? And that's another 2.0 of the business case. And the reason I didn't put that level of complexity in the slide is because I have too many boxes and there'd be too many different things. But I think Steve makes a good point. I think he's right, that there definitely are other points where business case questions come up in most waterfall projects.
Great. And I can't promise that all these questions are perfect or won't be answered later on, maybe, or haven't been answered in earlier webinars, but let's hope for the best. Fergus asks, is a safe release train just waterfall in disguise?
Okay, yes and no, because, and we will touch on this, but one of the interesting things about the release train is it's essentially waterfall over and over and over and over again. But then there's a whole bunch of decisions that you have at the very beginning that let you say, okay, here's what our release train pattern needs to look like. But within each release train program increment, you're going to go through all of the stages of that increment. You're going to go through all the stages that waterfall would cover. You're going to plan a bunch of stuff, do a bunch of stuff, check a bunch of stuff, get answers and feedback on a bunch of stuff, which is also the iterative agile cycle. The entirety of that happens within the single program increment cycle of an agile release train. We will go into that in a little more detail and with some pretty pictures as well that will hopefully spell it out. But it's not just waterfall in disguise because it has all that adaptability. It has an enormous system wrapped around it because it has a tremendous flow of information happening on a weekly basis, which we'll also touch on in a bit more detail.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm just trying to make sure that we get to a few questions. I don't think we're going to get to all of them at this stage, but let's get to what we can. How is the Michael is asking this, sorry. How is the interaction of the project manager and the scrum master and the project owner in a hybrid? Who is the main decision maker for the team?
So in a hybrid scenario, the closest relationship is with the project manager, is with the product owner. And if you're ever going to have a situation where two people are wearing the same hat, those are the two roles that might. The product owner is the closest thing you're going to get in most cases. And although it depends on the scale of the project and how many people are involved and do you have enough heads that you can put them on different hats on them, you would keep it separate if you had a situation where the project manager, typically they're responsible for the success, the commercial success of the project. So they're responsible for the business case, the ROI, etc. But in some ways, so is the product owner. So the product owner is also responsible for customer satisfaction. And there's where you can get your overlap. But you don't line that up with the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is the person who is representing and working with the team, and they're responsible for the harmony and the functioning of the team. So project management, I would suggest that one of the most likely events that you get is actually program management. When you get big enough and you're going on a hybrid scenario, you actually call it like a value stream manager or a program manager, or as SAFe calls them, which we'll talk about in a moment, the release train engineer. It's a slightly different role that sits above. So we'll explore that in a bit more detail in a moment.
Great. Luigi's asked, when I've thought about it, the only situation I can imagine pure Agile being used is the startup scenario. Any others?
If you say startup in the sense of the project itself, you're going to have a well-established organization that starts up something brand new, but they've got an existing infrastructure. They've got an existing platform. Maybe they're doing other things. They have all of that stuff already done, figured out, working, and other things happening on it. And they say, let's add another string to our bow. Let's do another thing. And it's almost entirely code. It's almost entirely software, or it's almost entirely service-based. It's all the soft stuff that we need to do because the hard stuff's there, and the hard stuff becomes our prerequisites. And then you might have a pure Agile response to doing that. But you could also say that actually that's kind of where DevOps lives. And it's still agile, but you might have a Scrum phase and then a DevOps phase with that. But in those situations, you could just as easily say, yeah, what that team or those people are doing could be described as purely agile. But I take the point that there's always going to be, in most projects, there's always going to be some crucial decisions up front. And we shouldn't let ourselves get hung up on branding and labeling of the methodology of how we make those decisions.
Great. Do we have time for one more before we look at the results of the hybrid?
Yeah, I'm going to do both. I'm going to share the poll, let people have a look at that. Let's do another question whilst everyone has a look at those answers.
Awesome. So Catherine had asked, for a large complex project, does it make sense to start with defining the architecture, technology, and cybersec constraints, waterfall, and then create the solution via the creativity of our DevOps team with our user story, Agile? Is that a way of looking at the hybrid of waterfall Agile? I'm not sure if I read that out correctly.
Look, I think it's a great example. I think it's a good, simple way of describing a use case, a situation where that's where the hybrid decision-making styles, if we call them that, instead of call them methodologies, that's exactly how you could apply them. I think it's a well-articulated example of that sort of idea in action. So yes, I agree. I think it is on the right track. Absolutely.
Right.
Let's pause our large-scale stuff because we might be getting ahead of some of what we're going to talk about with SAFe next over the next 20 minutes or so. So let's get through that, and then we'll have another round of Q&A at the end once we've covered these points and see what other questions we catch along then. And we can come back to any of these because they might still be relevant then. What do you think?
That sounds great to me.
All right. The challenges. This is for interest's sake. I'm very curious to see, and this is a choose many, right? The complexity fears, 49% saying that people are worried about multiple methods and how hard is it, etc. Well, I'm afraid I'm not going to make those fears any easier by what I'm about to talk about regarding the scaled agile framework. It's not necessarily, complexity is what complexity is. Let's not blame the methodology for an incredibly complex project or an incredibly complex needs statement or an incredibly complex vision. And this is one of the problems that I find with ideas that people say, hey, we should do this. And it sounds really simple when I say it, but it's millions of hours of work from dozens and dozens of people that are using incredibly complex technologies and systems. I miss that when I just describe it in such simple terms. I'm allowed to fall into this fallacy, this idea that, oh, it sounds simple to me, right? Why is your project so complex? Well, because what you asked for is really complex. And sometimes that's a harsh reality that people need to accept and get their head around. Let's go through some SAFe ideas. And as I've already alluded to before, we're really just scratching the surface of what SAFe covers. So forgive me if we're not able to go through all of the detailed questions of exactly how SAFe works tonight or even during the Q&A. SAFe is done by all the material you see here from the SAFe website, SAFe Inc. They are the organization behind this methodology. It's up to version 6 now. It's evolving like you'd expect. And if you want more information, there's tons and tons of information about how things work on their website. And of course, there's extra courses elsewhere. So let's allow those details to live where they are. And let's just see if we can pick out the most important elements out of it. I'm going to start with some 3 core ideas or core pillars of what was behind the origin, really, of where SAFe came from. One of them, of course, is agility. They wanted a system that would benefit from collaborative decision-making. We talked about these things in week 1. The idea of adaptive feedback, iterative planning, these elements, these attributes of agility is something that SAFe wanted to be able to do, obviously at scale, but this is a core element of it. A second, and we're going to go into a little more detail on this in a moment, is systems thinking. And this is a lot to do with the work that Deming did. This is the plan, do, check, act. This is, and how a system leads to emergent behavior. Emergent behavior is something you can't plan for. You can't prescribe. You can't put 6 people in a room and say, I know what's going to happen. I know what they're going to come up with. I know how they're going to work together. I can't put 6 people in a room and say, I can tell you 6 people exactly how to work perfectly together, right? No, we can't do that. We put them in a room, we give them a problem, we give them a whiteboard, and we let them go. And something will emerge out of that. And that's the emergent behavior. Certain people will start talking with other certain people. Certain ideas will get shared. Certain things will happen. But what we did do is we put those 6 people in that room for that 1 hour. That's the systems thinking this. If we join this and this, if we connect this to this and him to her, stuff will emerge out of it. Points of interconnect being leveraged. And let's reduce wastage. Let's adopt the principles of just in time. Let's help empower the knowledge workers, the people who know their job and who know how things work. And let's leverage that knowledge so that we can remove waste. Let's not have disconnected leadership, senior management people trying to make decisions about how the day-to-day stuff really should work. And this is one of the weaknesses of an overly planned method that says, well, we're going to make every decision in advance. Well, guess what? We're relying on a handful of experts. And yeah, they may be real experts and they may have a lot of great knowledge, but they're never going to have as much knowledge as the entirety of the team that's going to be working on building it. So we're going to miss out on stuff in that team. Let's tap into that and use that to not do anything that's a waste. Now, these are the fundamentals that were leaned upon, pardon the pun, to create the safe ideas at the very beginning. But I want to talk a bit more about systems thinking, because this is the core of what any scaled agile environment requires. And we talked about it. When we talked about Scrum, we talked extensively about the fact that you have to have a structure. You have to have a cadence. You have to have some predictability as to when people connect and share and understand and decide, and then they separate. And they separate uninterrupted to be able to do their work and be productive, but then they come back on a rhythm. It's the structure we talked about. We're talking about scaling that up. And there's a fundamental reason why we must treat this idea as sacred. System thinking says that only the whole system delivers value. It is not the components themselves. You take one thing out, you take a 10% out, you don't lose 10% of the result. You could lose 90% of the result because everything works harmoniously together, the entire system. Another way, what I often say is that, the whole isn't greater than the sum of the parts. The whole is an entirely different beast than the sum of the parts could ever be. And that's what systems thinking tries to leverage, tries to capture. And we can have unexpected interactions that we never could prescribe or plan for. We touched on this a moment ago. Systems allow for and exhibit emergent behavior. The system is what controls the opportunity to interconnect, and therefore the clever interactions to come out of that. This gives us synergies, opportunities, benefits, value, which we could never plan, but we've supported it. We've facilitated it. We've allowed for it. We've given it the opportunity. And because we've given it the opportunity proactively, deliberately, and that's the reason for the system, we're there with our butterfly net to capture all these pretty little things that come off that and say, oh, that's a good idea. That's good. That's a good thing. That's a good development. That's a good decision. That's good feedback. We're going to leverage that right now, and we're going to take advantage of it. And we do that because that's the whole reason we've got a system. But that means the whole purpose of the system, the whole connection to the vision, has to be symbiotic with its reason for existence. The system doesn't exist for its own sake. It's not structure for its own sake. Its structure exists in order to deliver results, deliver outcomes. Having a structure is sacred. A working, successful structure, when it works successfully, should be protected and preserved. But it should always be evolving and growing and adapting to be more and more suitable, more and more perfect, more and more effective. Because it's constantly working to evolve the context of what it's serving. And its real value is the points of interconnect. It's not about its value is not typically to do with the ability to provide documentation. It's not its auditability, right? It's not the fact that, well, we only need to train our people once, and we can do the same thing over and over again. I mean, yeah, there might seem to be benefits with that, but that's not the biggest reason to have a system. It's about the points of interconnect and what they can yield, which means any system has to be designed to fit those within it. Those that create it and those that benefit from it need to be stakeholders in the creation of a system. You can't design the best practice system from elsewhere, dump it upon a team or especially many teams and say, you're going to work this way now. This is how it's going to work. Unless you want to adopt an off-the-shelf system. If you want to say, well, how do we go about inventing that? I know. Let's just use one that's out there. Let's start with SAFe. And when you start to look at SAFe, you will find things that are absolutely prescriptive. And the reasons why they're absolutely prescriptive is because there are some things, and it's all about structure, which is the highlight of any agile system. There are some things that you can't just make open to debate with 100 people. There are some things, structural components, where it's not feasible to say, yeah, let's just take a poll and see how often we should sprint. There are things that need to be decided as per the plan-based methodology ideas we've already talked about. There's stuff that we can lock in up front. And one of the benefits of having a system that's standardized, that's used elsewhere, is that we can start with that as a training familiarity. Everyone gets familiar with that. But systems thinking is a way of doing the opposite of what silos do in an organization, where we've all experienced some degree of silos in an organization where left hand doesn't know what right hand is doing. And, people that are working at odds with each other because they don't even know that that's what they're doing, or duplicating work and effort, etc. Systems thinking is meant to be the opposite of that. We're not only aware, we're not only avoiding wastage, but we're leveraging interactions. A few points on SAFe. It's about unifying at scale. It's about bringing things together, any number of people, on layers that get bigger and bigger and bigger the more people we bring into it. The more teams we bring in, the bigger the layers get. So you have different structures. You have essential, you have portfolio, you have 5 different layers of what SAFe can operate at. SAFe also empowers the individual. People have a say. People have a say just like in Scrum. There is a mechanism there for people to say, are they ready? Are they happy to take on the work that's being prescribed for the next program increment, the next stuff? It's a confidence vote. There are ways for all people to bring their expertise. When the planning is talked about of how do we do this? When do we do this? In what way do we do this? Who do we do this with? We leverage the knowledge workers, the people that know how to do the work. So it creates these points of interconnect. It forces us into certain points of interconnect, and it stops us from interconnecting outside of those, so that we preserve the cognitive momentum that we talked about in previous weeks, where we talked about the benefit of having the uninterrupted period of sprinting, where you can just focus on going flat out straight ahead and not worry about what might happen the week after, because it'll be a distraction that might cause you to be less productive or make mistakes. And the complexity we need gets added as we need the complexity. And it creates this conduit, like all the way from the top to the bottom. This situation where the very highest level of management have access to the people who know what's going on at the most fundamental layer. And they have access to the people at the very top who are making the biggest decisions. And there's a line, there's a conduit for sharing that information all the way up and down. So here's the major elements. I put them all up because we won't go through them in a great deal of detail. We're going to go through these 2 in a little bit of detail. That's as far as we're going to get tonight over the next 10 minutes or so. An agile release train is where you have multiple teams and they work together in a coordinated format. And that coordinated format is the agile release train, the ART. And it's the structure by which a number of teams will work together on things that have meaning their outputs have meaning to each other, because the thing they're doing is that big, it needs multiple teams. Interestingly, SAFe says that a team should be no more than 10 in size. That's what it considers to be a single team. And a program increment is a period of time that, do you remember when we talked before about a release plan, where in Scrum you have a number of sprints, and at the end of X number of sprints, you want to be able to deliver some capability, probably because you want to invoice for that, right? That's what a program increment is. It's just putting some structure around that. Say, well, a program increment is this number of sprints for everybody. Doesn't matter what team you're in, where you work, what you're working on, how it all hangs together. Your program increment is this long. And when you have a project that you think, well, maybe it's a year-long project, right? You figure out at the very front, you're going to plan base your schedule for when your program increments are going to end for the next 12 months. So you might say, well, we're going to go 6 sprints. 6 sprints is a very common number. And each sprint's got to be 2 weeks. Also typically prescribed by SAFe. So you're going to say, well, I'm going to say, here's how it's going to map out. All decided up front. It's got principles, 10 of them. If you go and look at the website and you look at the principles, it'll give you a breakdown and a couple of pages there on each one of these. These are, they've always been the same ideas that SAFe is wanting us to think about. Principles is what we fall back on when we're not sure where in the methodology or where in the instructions to turn to. So take an economic view means that this has got to be commercially viable. We have to have a commercial, economically viable perspective on all of this. It says apply systems thinking. The system is our savior. And it'll make sense. The more you get into SAFe, the more you say, oh, they've got a system for that, and they've got a system for that. It says preserve your options. Be flexible. That's Scrum. That's agility, right? Assume that things will be variable. Assume uncertainty. Assume change. Build incrementally. That's the whole iterative process of any agile system. Fast integrated learning cycles. Build, learn, build, learn. We've been through that with the Scrum even. Same principle being applied. Milestones should be based on the evaluation of working system. Remember we talked about how in Scrum, a sprint needs to be long enough to be able to deliver something that's working, so the customer can actually get their head around it and give us reasonable feedback. It's the same message listed here as a principle of SAFe. Make value flow without interruptions. Remember we talked about the principle of when you're in a sprint, you stay in the sprint. And everyone in it is expected to be allowed to just focus on their work. That's the same principle here, embodied in SAFe. Apply a cadence, synchronize with cross-domain planning. So this is what we talked about that says you want to have the planning rhythm of sprinting the same rhythm all the way through. You're not changing the length of your sprints. That was simply a good idea in Scrum. In SAFe, it's an absolute. Unlock the intrinsic motivation of knowledge works. Now, there's a very interesting point about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. If you think about KPIs, if you think about the objectives that are extrinsic, when we're expected to go and do our job or do a good job because we get paid, we get this, we get that, we get something else, and we avoid all the negative stuff. That's extrinsic. That's outside of the actual work. What SAFe embodies is intrinsic motivation, which is to say that let's find ways for the workers to enjoy the work because of the work, working in a way that's enjoyable, working on things that are enjoyable. Where the motivation to do it is about tackling the problem, solving it, having access to what they need to be able to bring their best expertise into that situation in that moment and deliver the best output and the satisfaction that people get out of that. Let's leverage that. Let's maximize that. Decentralized decision-making, we've talked about that before, where the individuals have a say in how things work and we organize around value. That's sort of a last catch-all that wraps it all up. These are the principles to live by in a scaled agile. This is the same stuff we talked about with Scrum, and we talked about it with the philosophies that we covered in week 1. Same things that are building towards a larger scale framework. This is from Scaled Agile Inc. website. Here you can see, this is just a grab bag of all the things that come together. It's talking about organizational agility. It's talking about continuous learning. We talked about that with Scrum in the initial week 1. It talks about technical agility. So these are broad ideas that filter in. This isn't yet a method. Here we start to see a bit of a method. And we're going to focus on this bit here in a moment. So we're going to talk about what the Agile release train looks like. We've already talked about it a little bit. The Agile release train is the idea that your cadence and your rhythm and your ability to interact with it is strictly managed, closely managed, cannot be messed about with. Why? Because you could have dozens, scores, or even hundreds of people working within that rhythm, that pattern, that system, that structure. The structure has to be robust enough that everyone knows what they're doing and how to do it. I mentioned before here, you've got essential, large, solution, portfolio, full. You add things to these structural layers as you go up. Now, a good question came up before, waterfall versus Agile and the release train. The idea within any safe environment is it doesn't matter how many teams you have. Teams, cross-functional teams, will do all of these functions within the team. They will define the needs. So we talked before about interpreting user stories, helping users understand, figure out exactly what they need and want. Team will help define the task. Teams will build the things. Teams will test the things. And teams will deploy using continuous integration. The one team of up to 10 will do all those things. And they'll do them sprint after sprint after sprint. So everything's self-contained within the team. And that might mean a range of skill sets occurring within the team. The other two things that a team needs to have is that they have their own Scrum Master and they have their own product owner within a team of 10, or add on to a team of 10 in some cases. So you still have those two roles. Those two functions still exist. Now, here's the problem side of things. Right? One of the biggest questions that often comes up is, well, hang on, why do we have to be so strict about our cadence? Why do we all have to line up? Because if you don't, this is what you get. You get that scenario where, these teams are iterating and you think you're on track. You're plodding along, you're doing your thing. And here's team one, right? Their example is they're iterating on this scale, and then they get to this where they think they're ready to release the stuff they've done. This is their number of sprints. This team started a bit late and they're a whole sprint late. This team is having longer sprints, fewer of them. They're here. It's the misalignment. How do you get all these teams, these three teams together at the end of a single point where it says it's all got to go live? All of these teams are building different pieces of capability that's all got to come together and launch, except that this team's not ready and this team hasn't done quite as much. So this is the safe method. This is the scaled version. All right, so this is your team. This is your Scrum Master, product owner. Every team iterates on the same basis and continuously integrates this. Building, building, building. And this marker here, this is a program increment. And this marker here is another program increment. So here you have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 sprints within a single program increment. So this team will get together just with their team every sprint. And this other person called a release train engineer. So you have the Scrum Master who's facilitating the daily stand-ups and who's facilitating the Scrum meetings here, the planning meetings here. And you have the release train engineer that's facilitating the once a week meeting where all 3 teams get together, the Scrum of Scrums. And that can sometimes be leadership from those teams, and it can sometimes be more members of the teams that have things to talk about. It's the release train engineer is therefore managing the interdependencies between teams. This team's working on something and they need information from here and they need something information from here. They're normally very easily sharing information between each other because they're a small, cohesive type team of 10. But when they need things from other teams, it's their Scrum Masters facilitating that via the release train engineer that sits across the top. And then once every program increment, they all get together. All of them, all of these teams, all of these people in these teams, they all get together and we figure out whether or not we've delivered the capability that was expected, that was delivered, that was required, that was demanded. And we plan what's going to happen for the next program increment, as in the next number of sprints. And yeah, SAFe tells us, ideally, you want them all in the same room, or at least the same building. And yeah, look, we know that ever since COVID, especially, that's become hard, not always feasible, but it does deliver superior results. So if we don't get everyone together physically and allow those emergent behaviors and those incidental conversations to come out of it, then we'll pay a price for that. So we develop on a cadence, but we release on demand. The program increment is the demand that says you will release something useful at the end of that point. And so when you're back here figuring that out, you think, okay, we're going to sit down and make all those decisions based on what we've got to deliver at this point. So let's talk for a moment about the final point in this that I'm going to cover, program increment planning, because it's a doozy. All members of the Agile release train, all members of all teams that are working together, they get together for 2 days, 2 whole days, to conduct the large-scale planning of the next program increment. Everybody, all together. The event happens pretty strict. Like, there's a very tight agenda. I'm going to show you the agenda that SAFe recommended at the moment. Now, yeah, we can make our own agenda, but it should be of similar strictness, because you may have 100 people involved in this. And everyone has to have the opportunity to express what they need based on their expertise. What we don't ever want to be arguing with is about the process or about the structure. And they end up with a confidence vote, which they call the Fist of Five. So the idea of the confidence vote is that even once they've been through all this planning and they've figured out, et cetera, then there's a confidence vote, which is a show of hands. And however many fingers you put up, the more fingers, the more confidence. So 5 fingers means full of confidence. If the whole team puts up 5 fingers, they probably haven't taken on enough work. If anyone puts up 2 fingers, they are asked and have given the voice within their team to share why they're only 2 fingers confident. But if the average across the team is 3 fingers or more, management is expected to accept that team's plan for what they're going to do in the next program increment. And if all the teams come up with their plans and they've agreed and they've hashed out, yeah, this is what we can deliver in the next program increment, we're all raising our 3 fingers or more in confidence, and top management says, oh, this isn't as much as we were hoping to get done in this increment, too bad. What management can't do under SAFe is go along and say, come on, stretch, make stretch goals, try a bit harder, you can do a bit more than that. No, not going to happen, because it's not going to happen. The team is already dealing with what they believe they can deal with. Now, if like with Scrum, if they've got a little capacity left over, they could do something about it. But the release train engineer is the Scrum Master of Scrum Masters that is managing the release train and managing this 2-day event. And it's a harrowing 2-day event for the release train engineer. Here's an example from the Scaled Agile Inc. website. I'm just going to pause for a second and let everyone have a look at how tight and intense and how strict and how they design this to function in 2 days with scores of people, multiple teams. Yes, even lunch is planned.
That is a long day.
It's a long day. It's longer than this. It's never going to get done by that time frame. Really? 2:15 to, and yeah, question mark. Yeah, till midnight. If that's what it takes. Until everyone's got a confidence vote of 3 fingers or more. And then we're accepting it. And that takes as long as it takes. And that's why it's however long, that's when you call for pizzas, because you could be there all night. Strictly managed event, super structure. So this is all the things we talked about starting from week 1 and week 2 in this short course. We talked about the whole importance of structure. SAFE is an example of saying, if you want to take that big, structure is what's going to save you. Structure is what's going to get you there. And you can take that structure. If you get senior management, and in this kind of event, you're going to have a top management and senior management involved. You get to this level of event, and you have the opportunity of using that kind of structure for the execution of the entire corporate strategy. We know what corporate strategy is. Most companies have got one. It's why are we here? Why do we exist? What are we planning to do over the next 1, 3, 5 years, right? We have a corporate strategy to conquer the world. But we can use strategic agile methods to run any company. Because things that are disparate, that they're distinct from each other, it doesn't mean they have to be worked out separate from each other. Strong systems of coordination allow for opportunistic synergies between different components of even a corporate strategy. A rhythm and a cadence, any corporate strategy is executed on a cadence. What typically happens, though, is that the feedback loop is too weak. There isn't the right kind of systemic control of the flow of information. So agile methods are a way of using scaled agile to adapt the execution of any business corporate strategy. It's also a way of getting rid of the wastage, recognizing it, seeing it. How many times have we been in a situation where an organization has been pedaling away and we get how many quarters down a strategy and realize that stuff's going on that shouldn't, or that's been wasted, or that's time and effort's being lost? It's all because we're not using the structural rhythm of information flow and feedback. Even though we're talking about quarterly stuff, the exact same ideas that would happen in a Scrum scenario can be applied as a structural answer to the ignorance that can allow corporate strategy to go off target. And whenever you're talking about corporate strategy, the most important outcome of any corporate strategy is the incremental delivery of value. We've got to keep getting more, moving more in the right direction. That's what we're all after. And that's exactly what all agile methods are looking for. So here's a final takeaway point, and then we're going to finish up with a poll and some final questions that people might have. I'm going to try and sum up our entire 4-week course in a single sentence, because that's just how we roll here. Agile means using a system of structured interaction to incrementally gain and leverage new knowledge in our next and best decisions. And if it's not structured, it's not agile. It's chaos, it's random, it's whimsical, but it's not a method if it's not structured. Chantel, would you mind please launching our final poll? And then we'll see if other questions come in. Yeah, thank you.
I have definitely launched that. We've got some questions, but before we get to questions, one of the things that I've noticed in the chat is people are talking about how the Agile method would work in different scenarios. And there is some potential disbelief that it would work in different scenarios. One of the students had asked if there are any case studies available for non-software development for how the Agile methodology had been applied. And is that something we can potentially provide for our students?
I'm happy to do that search and find. I don't know any offhand, but that's a great question. And that's a great thread for the forum. And I can certainly add to that. But I suspect others will have others that they can find as well, or may even have anecdotes that have been part of. But I think that's a great thing to share and talk about. Because I think that's an open question. I mean, it's often easily accepted that, yeah, look, this stuff applies to software, but what else? And we tried to touch on some of that in week 1, but case studies of where it's actually happened, good or bad, I think are great things to have. So let's make a note to follow that up and put some of that in a thread in the next couple of days.
All right. And I'm going to read out some questions. I hope I read out the good ones. If you have questions, put them in the Q&A now, because I think that's pretty helpful. You were mentioning talking about large-scale projects in this second half. So one of the questions Jessica asked is for a large project, developing a new program which will be implemented business-wide. What would you suggest the best hybrid methods are that should be implemented? Our project has been in progress for 4 years.
So one of the issues that I've seen happen with business-wide projects is that the hardest part is getting all the stakeholders to share what they actually need to share. And one of the problems with that is that people don't know what they don't know. So with a plan-based methodology, and even though you might say, okay, well, there's some hard things we've got to decide up front, because we can't reinvent the wheel. We can't throw all this stuff out halfway through because we've changed our minds. So you all are going to have to figure things out up front. And everyone's like, oh, but I don't even know what this thing is, right? We undercook that. So there's 2 ways to go about that. One is that we might need to have a much bigger, informative, open couple of sessions. We might need to take time out of productivity, which is an incredibly painful thing to say to the average corporate executive. Let your people stop working for not just 20 minutes, but for an entire day to get their head around these things, share their concerns, get rid of their assumptions, and really contribute so that halfway through, we're not all staring at a wild elephant because they didn't know what they didn't know. And then the other way of dealing with it is that you have a repeat of that. Like you have let's stop and check what's going on. You have a health check and you do it again. And you say, right, like all the stakeholders that really need to, that have sort of forgotten about this because it's been bubbling along and it's not top of mind. They're not being asked. Well, let's ask them. Let's have structured interaction that says, come on, everyone, get back in. Let's see where we're on track and where we're not. And then we figure out that that's wrong. This is wasted. This isn't going to deliver, yada, yada, yada. And we could, a lot of the time things take longer is because those questions, there's too much of an interval between those questions or they don't get all the right stakeholders involved. Those things are typically done far too relaxed and ad hoc. And there's far too much worry about, we can't stop people from doing their day job, the business as usual. Well, if you don't, you might get something terrible at the end of it, and it's going to take far too long to get there. So and it's a long-winded answer to the question, but yeah, it's really all about invest more in the interaction up front and on a repeated basis if you need to.
Have you ever been short-winded, Brenton? Ever?
No.
No.
Look, if it happened, I either can't recall or I blocked that from my memory. I'm sure some of our people here know that I could talk the leg off an iron pot.
I would never say that about you because I've never heard that saying before. Stephen again has asked, what is the deliverable at the end of the PI planning agenda, i.e. what are the outcomes? Are the outcomes documented? And if so, is there a name for this document, or else it could just be a talk fest?
So I'm not sure about the names for it, but the artifact that you're getting is the product backlog that's been agreed upon by the team and the release train engineers and the head product owners, that's what each team is going to work on. Like that's the user stories lined up like ducks in a row over the next X number of sprints, or more often talked about in terms of capability, as in bunches of user stories working together. And that's what's been agreed upon as being deliverable at the end of that program increment with a high degree of confidence or a sufficient degree of confidence. That's the artifact. It's that plan of that's what we're going to do. And it's literally taken out of the product backlog. not the entire product backlog, because there's a higher level of planning above that that says, well, here's the first 100 user stories that we kind of need to do in the first PI or second PI. So yeah, that's what you got to choose from, we think. But then we have all the conversations and arguments. But that's the artifact you get. You get the plan of action for the next however many weeks it is. And once you get that agreement and you lock that in, you're not going to mess with it short of an earthquake.
Yeah, and let's pray that an earthquake doesn't happen. Shwetha asked, there might be a chance of slipping the timeline more sprints than expected on a program increment to finish. What happens then?
So if a program increment, like if let's say a team, everyone did their very best to have that plan, that artifact that I just talked about, and high degree of confidence, and we think, etc. But it's not what we thought. Or now, heaven forbid, let's rule out the possibility of someone externally coming in and messing with that's not going to happen, because people will get smacked on the wrist quite heavily. A release train engineer will use a baseball bat to people to try and do that to the team. So let's not assume that's the reason. Let's say it was harder than they thought, or the exploration, the assumptions they relied upon, no, and they're behind. So what never happens is we don't push back the PI, where that absolutely never happens. What might happen is what might happen with any sprint period is to say, well, we're going to have to carve off certain pieces of work that we're not going to get done. And we'll know that because we're having several sprints, and each sprint is meant to be delivering incremental progress towards that. So by a couple of sprints in, there might be a realization that we're slipping. We're not going to get there. It's not going to happen. That's where every team has their own scrum master and their own product owner constantly looking at this to say, well, what do we do? You know, what's the bit of functionality that we have to drop out of this? Let's talk to the release train engineer. Let's talk to the head product owner. Let's get that information. Let's manage that. That's their job. That's what they're there to do. And they will do that on a case-by-case, situation-by-situation basis, so that they'll help that team deal with, and it's not the team's fault. They knew what they knew, and that's all they knew. And that's all they're expected to know, right? And they get to that point and it's not quite right, and they'll learn from that. And the next program increment, they'll probably get better at it. You could also find people that are new to it, new to this stuff. They're making some guesses. You also get people that are overly ambitious. They think they're going to please somebody by taking on more work than they should, and they end up disappointing that person, because that's not how things work. So yeah, there's learning curves and there's consequences for those learning curves, but there's people there to deal with that and help them deal with it in a collaborative manner.
That sounds really great. Before we get to the end of course, you know, the wrapping up section, I just thought one of the questions that we had on the list to be answered from Luigi is a good one to leave us on. Are there any particular methodologies emerging for doing digital transformations, or just new methodologies emerging that might be relevant here?
My opinion, and it is only an opinion, I'm not aware of anything beyond the sorts of things we've talked about. What I don't think is very new is the fundamental ideas that are the reasons why things work the way they do, which we began with in week 1. I don't think there's much that's new discovery in that area. I think what's new is that there's a much greater awareness and respect for what those mechanisms and forces actually do for us. So I'm not aware of new methodologies that aren't merely a new mixture or a new way of dealing with those same fundamental forces. What is new and what is absolutely going to change things is the role of AI on information flow and knowledge sharing and understanding. And I did sort of touch on this a couple of weeks ago, but we are definitely going to see changes and improvements in the ability for people to be aware of things that they don't currently even know to ask. And that's going to dramatically improve the efficiency of this. And this is going to help more and more organizations get more and more confident and comfortable with the ability to be more adaptive, to be more agile, because the I didn't know what I didn't know problem will improve over time. So that's probably the only sort of new kid on the block that's going to have a bit of a shake-up, but it's really just going to improve an existing paradigm. It's going to make some parts of it different, and we'll get some new tools out of it. We'll get some novel new ways of doing things, but the underlying forces themselves, I don't think will change very much.
Yeah, that seems fair. I think that makes sense. Do we want to have a quick look at the most interesting topic results?
Yep, sharing that now.
Not a huge amount of love for topic 1. You know, fundamentals, not that exciting.
Well, yeah, we were just kind of like dusting the road a little bit there and setting things up. But people got the most interest out of topic 3, it seems, which it had a lot of novel stuff and new ideas in topic 3, new approaches. So it's very interesting to see that resonated for a large number of people. But we also had a lot of people that enjoyed it broadly, which is always great.
And to be expected, you know, this week people are like, yeah, I remember this one. So
yeah, recency always plays some role, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we're finishing up, a big thank you to Brenton for presenting this course. It's really interesting to listen to and to learn more. If you are interested in this topic, we do have one of our subjects is about Agile, and that is included in some of our masters and graduate certificates. And so IT Masters, as you may know, offers masters and graduate certificates with Charles Sturt University. They're all distance learning. If you're interested at all, come check out our website. You can fill out an eligibility form so someone from our team can contact you and tell you, you know, if you're eligible and if you could get credit, where if you complete 3 of these free short courses, and we have about 50 free short courses available for you to sit, and you can do the exam at any time. If you complete 3 of them, you can get one subject's industry unspecified elective credit in your master or graduate certificate, which is pretty good, but there are a lot of other ways you can get credit in our courses. So please contact us if you're interested in further study with us. But as I said earlier, we will have another free short course being announced next week, which is really exciting, with Dr. George Thomas talking about the CompTIA Security Plus certification. And Brenton will surely be back. I don't know if that's a threat to Brenton, but it's definitely going to happen.
Can't keep me away. I'll think of something. If you don't have some ideas, I'll find one. Don't worry.
Yeah, to be fair, if we're like, okay, what short courses are we going to do next year? We go to Brenton, what short courses are you interested in doing? He's like, I have a few ideas.
But isn't that a question in the survey? Is that one of the things we ask people? What other courses would you like to see?
Yeah, so fill out that survey.
Yeah, do the survey. Tell us.
And the end of short course exam will be released by tomorrow evening. We're just finalizing some of those details there, but we can promise you it will be released tomorrow evening. But fill out the survey as well, because we really want to hear your feedback, and we want to hear the answer to that question of what other short courses do you want to do, to make sure that we're covering all the potential areas that you're interested in.
Fantastic. And I want to thank everyone for all their wonderful questions and comments and participation. It's been fantastic to see the lively involvement that everyone has had. That we've had some terrific questions. I know that we've had some very knowledgeable people in this subject and this course as well. There's been some great answers in the chat live as we go through it. And there's also been some great answers in the forums for people that are sharing their knowledge, which is wonderful to see because there's often no right answer, but there's always good advice to be found. So thank you to everyone who's contributed their comments and suggestions along the way. It's wonderful to have.
And yeah, the biggest thank you to Brenton for presenting for us. Always an amazing job. Thank you and good night. And if you have any further questions, we have the forums on the learn.itmasters.edu.au page. And we look forward to that robust discussion about actual real life examples of the Agile methodology being implemented.
Thank you, Chantel, and thank you for filling in tonight, doing a wonderful job this evening as our MC. And thank you to Lily for doing a terrific job wrangling all of those back-end questions and handling all the admin stuff for us. We couldn't do it without you. Until next time, our next short course together, that's all from me for now. Thank you and good night.
Good night, all.